welcome to our informative hour. Hopefully this isn't going to be too much of a lecture. We'll keep it quite conversational. Hopefully we can all learn a little something, but also get a bit of feedback from you guys and how you're finding things out there and any pain points and bits and pieces that we might want to discuss. So very quick intro. Jason and Stuart, MIMO Connect. Jason's background is on the yachts, 12 years working as a ETO AVIT on board. So really appreciates all the pain points that ETOs experience with connectivity and various IT issues. Worked on new build as well as operational for those 12 years and brings a whole heap of experience to it. Quite well known in the industry. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but certainly well known and well respected in the industry. So that's Jason. He's our CTO and our founder as well.
And we have Stu, more than 20 years of account management, relatively new to the SuperYacht industry, but my gosh, account management, looking after customers, that's definitely Stu's strength and forte. And together we've come to the show to say hi to everyone, to show face and discuss internet. It's quite a diverse topic. Get knocked out by the banner. But we would like you guys to ask questions. If you've got any concerns, if you've got any thoughts, if you've heard anything, and if we spark that a bit of interest about internet, please do come and speak to us, come and ask us, and we'll do our best to explain in very simple terms what is actually quite a complicated connectivity on board yachts. Okay.
So the title of today's chat is The Importance of Diverse Connectivity on Board. It's quite literally what MIMO stands for, multi-in, multi-out. The idea that we don't just rely on one source of the internet coming into your vessels. You have one source of internet, you have one point of failure, and nothing for backup, nothing for diversity. So we're going to start with you guys, really. Bit of a show of hands here. Who has a cell phone? Bit of a no-brainer. I think we all do. Obviously, this is geared towards onboard as well. Does your yacht have cellular data connections? Potentially expecting a few more captains on board. Do you have VSAT? And who doesn't have Starlink? Or should I phrase that as, who here hasn't heard of Starlink? Yeah, it's become ubiquitous, isn't it? So why does diverse connectivity matter? It matters because we're trying to avoid this. You have owners on board. You have owners that are making important calls all day, every day. Even a small disconnection at the point of them making a multi-million-pound deal, that's going to sit with the ETO. That's going to sit with whoever makes those decisions based on how many sources of connectivity you have. Even a small drop like this can make a huge difference to an important phone call. So this is what we talk about when we talk about diversity. You wouldn't go to sea with only one engine. So why would you connect to something as important as the internet and something that is so important to ships' operations and a multitude of other things with only one internet source? Reliable connectivity is critical for so many things. Owners, guests, crew. There is an increased reliance on digital services, not only entertainment content, navigation, automation, safety, everything it boils down to our connectivity solutions and staying connected to the internet. Nothing's 100% perfect. That's why diversity is important. Absolutely nothing out there works 100% of the time. So why would you rely on just one? So Jason's going to have a little chat about key connectivity technologies and the difference between what is out there and available on the market. Okay.
So as we've all started with VSAT, it's a geostationary, it's over the equator. It's a high altitude at roughly 36,000 kilometers. That's what we've all come to know, and that has been the main connectivity for a lot of yachts. Let's put it in the old days. It's a high latency, high cost, and obviously latency is the speed, which we've all come to know. If we do a Google search, we want it to come up straight away. If we load a web page, we want that web page to load straight away. If we send a WhatsApp message, we want to see the 2 ticks straight away to make sure that the message has been delivered. We don't want to wait 3/4 of a second, 1 second to get that feedback. We've come to know that we want instant results, and we're not prepared to wait for it. So that's the Geo VSAT connectivity we have. Now, with everyone is familiar with Starlink and OneWeb, which is a LEO, a low Earth orbiting satellite, and they will be anywhere from even as low as 320 kilometers up to 1,200, up to 2,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. With the satellite coming that much closer, you're going to have less latency. You're going to require less power to transmit down to the satellites, and obviously much higher speed and much lower latency. So this is why we're seeing with Starlink, because it's so close at roughly 520 kilometers at the moment, you're seeing the latency of 20 to 40 milliseconds on Starlink, and you're seeing speeds of hundreds and hundreds of megabits on the downlink and 15 to say 35 megabits on the uplink. So this is what everyone's come to see as the new standard for internet on board. And then backing up to that, we've got the next one, which is cellular networks. That's what we've used in conjunction with a geostationary. We used a cellular connection when you were close to shore with up to like 35 kilometers away from a cell tower. With a cellular network, it's the best effort. So there's no CIR, there's no guaranteed speed. And that's why it's the best effort. Cellular is also a low latency. So for many yachts nowadays, we see that they're using a combination of Starlink on a LEO. They're using cellular as a backup, or in some cases, they're using it as a working, as a main connection if Starlink is not available in a particular territory.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a key point as well, is the aggregation of these LEO satellites with the cellular network, because the latency is so similar. It's quite easy to file over and aggregate the traffic between the two. A really good point on this as well is the variable cost of cellular networks. So depending on where you are in the world, depends on how much that data is going to cost you on a cellular, as we probably all know from using our mobile phones out here. If you're in the EU, the cost of Starlink and cellular is pretty similar. So really, from a budgetary point of view, it doesn't matter which one you use. And a lot of our customers will decide, okay, well, we will go to whichever one, we'll use whichever one has the best signal at that point in time. There's not really much to choose between them as far as cost goes. If you come to the Caribbean or some even further flung places, that cellular data cost can be through the roof. 10, 20, 30 pound per gigabyte instead of, $1 for Starlink. So then it becomes important for us to make sure we're steering that traffic to the least expensive one. So a few things to consider really when we're talking about connectivity. How many diverse connections do you need on board? Well, the answer to that is certainly 2. Probably the real answer to that is how many can you afford? The more the better. The more likely you are to have that diversity, to have that failover. But really, we would suggest at least 2. How many inputs can my system handle? Again, that will be down to what is on board, what you need on board. And that varies vessel to vessel, and really is something that you're probably best engaging a company, much like ourselves, to look into and see what is required on board to provide you with that diversity. Which technologies match my passage plan? That's a really important one. Not that there is no system of the 3 that we've shown you there that covers absolutely everywhere globally. There's some political political and geo restrictions on certain systems. There is obviously, if you're more than 35 kilometers or so away from the shore, you're never going to get a cellular connection. So there is all of these factors to think about when you're planning your passage. Where are we going? What is the best coverage at that point? And are we diverse enough to make sure that we have coverage at every point of that? Well, you need separate systems for crew, owners, guests. We have quite a lot of our customers that will say, you know, we have this input that is dedicated solely for the owner. That is the owner's input. And we have separate one for the guests or for the crew or whatever it might be. Do you have quiet periods? So a great example of that is if you're in a shipyard and you're under a roof, Starlink's not going to work. You're not going to get any satellite signal. You're not going to get a cellular signal. You might be able to plug into shoreside, hardwire into the shoreside internet. But do you need an alternative to that as well? Do I need help? Essential one, that really. You know, you may have an ETO, you might have an IT guy on board, you might have an AVIT on board that is looking after this for you. Do they have time to do this? Do they have the expertise to do this, to know where they are and where the passage plan is and which is the best connection for them to use at any one point in that journey? Or do you need an external? You may not have an ETO on board. You may not have a yacht big enough to have an ETO on board or to justify the expense of an ETO. So do you need an external company that are going to keep an eye on that, make sure you are connected wherever you go? All things to think about. Over to Jason.
So yeah, we have an example of a demo equipment which has multiple interfaces all plugged into one. You can almost see it like a motorway where you have multiple lanes on a freeway and you've got a slow, medium and fast lane. And what you're doing is you're aggregating a lot of connections together to have what is a truly MIMO connection, a multi-in, multi-out connection. And what that would do is you can then set the priorities and you can say, well, I'm in this territory. I know cellular is super expensive, but it is important. If a lower cost shore connection or a Wi-Fi connection or a Starlink connection were to drop, then you'll have your connection, your IP traffic will still flow through and the customer's connection will remain online. The video will not buffer. The WhatsApp call will not drop. The Teams or Zoom a video conference will not buffer and stutter. So that's what we're advocating, is that you have something like this where you can have all your interfaces plugging in, which is called an SD-WAN, a software-defined wide area network. So you bring all your connections in, you can do all your rule-based and set up your priorities. But the main thing is to ensure that the connection always remains connected and no interruption to the end customer.
We have a graphic representation of that.
So here we have an aggregated a bar graph of, in blue and green, you can see these are the WAN ports where you'd typically have a Starlink terminal connected. It's the lowest cost. And right at the bottom here, you've got some cellular connections. So there you can see that actually you do still have some usage on cellular, but that would be where Starlink would drop out for various reasons. It could be at anchor. There could be a partial blockage if the terminal's too close to the mast. It could be a massive deluge, a downpour of rain, and it cuts out the KU band because Starlink uses a KU band on the downlink. Or it could be, I've seen a vessel where the vessel's a small tender and it has a high pitch when they're underway. So when they're going at 42 knots, the Starlink disconnects and we're like, hang on a sec, what angle are you? And it was because they had such a high bow angle that the
terminal was pointing at the horizon rather than the sky.
Yeah, so that would be a really good example why you would need to have a diversity in your connection. Here we have an example of a modem that's been online for 11 days and 3 hours, and the uptime is 11 days and 3 hours. So they've not actually lost internet since that modem was last rebooted. And then on our next graph, we'll show you, this is 2 WAN ports, and you can see over a month, there's been 792 disconnects. And these are all very small micro drops. But as we've shown in the previous, the actual modem has not lost internet for 11 days, and that was the last time it was rebooted. So this will give you a working example of why we believe that diversity within your internet connection is so important, because even though you've got Starlink, or you've got VSAT, or you've got a Wi-Fi or a shore connection, there could be a drop, there could be a power failure, there could be some interference nearby the yacht. So by having a diverse connection, you've always got IP traffic flowing through the router.
And this is a real anonymized case data here. So this is real world. This isn't something we've made up to prove our point. This is a real world example. You know, all of these disconnects that you can see over the last 11 days have not stopped that yacht from being connected 24/7 because of diversity of connection, nothing else.
And then once you have a stable connection, then you can start to look at your other services as well on board a yacht, because most yachts, what are they using the internet for? They're obviously using it to receive content. What type of content? Is it the news? Is it your communications with WhatsApps and FaceTime and Zoom and Teams calls? It's your video on demand, your Netflix, your Hulu, your Amazon Prime, your ATT Now, Spotify. So there's a lot of content that gets delivered to the vessel. And this is the next thing is a customer would like a VPN connection. So they might have, they will have a guest on board, or they could have a guest on board that will say, well, we want all our traffic to come out the US or come out the UK. And that's where you can provide these virtual private networks to the clients for their own IP breakout.
Really important, that point there as well is geographically there's certain places where content is blocked, as we probably all know. So if you want to access certain content when you're in certain areas, you need to have a VPN. You need to have your IP breaking out somewhere else, which again is something really important. We have customers that have a VPN that breaks out in the US and the UK. They might have US owners, but tend to charter in the UK, or vice versa. So the owners would want to break out somewhere. Guests want to break out somewhere else. So that's something that we find is quite important for our customers.
Advances in technology. I mean, we've seen a 4K TVs on board where you're getting super high def content, and it's going to require far more data, higher speeds, increased with the lower latency. So the demand of content has been an exponential growth, where people are moving towards more streaming services on board for everything, from the navigation of the onboard charts to get the chart updates, corrections, that's coming through the internet. All your weather is coming through the internet. All your communications. Loads of yachts have onboard WhatsApp groups where they're communicating. In the old days, you'd obviously have a VHF or you'd have a UHF radio where you'd have the direct comms, but more and more frequently people are using internet as their main communication. So that's why we see that the internet on board a yacht is of utmost critical importance, that it's stable, reliable, and obviously cost-effective for the owner. So the advances in technology, we just see there being more and more options available. Once we get the other LEO operators online, and they've launched their satellites and they've added to the capacity, we'll see some interesting developments in the near future with some of the other LEO operators.
Yeah, absolutely. Expensive legacy systems. So we're coming across customers now that potentially have aged equipment on board. And that's a consideration and a challenge on board. Do we replace that? Do we maintain that? Do we fix anything going wrong with it, or do we replace it with a different system? So again, just something to consider. Time management. Multiple technologies means multiple companies to deal with a lot of the time. We find when we're troubleshooting, if we have a customer that has all of their connectivity solutions with one company, it's one throat to choke, as they say, one support ticket to raise, one phone call to make, and that company can check every single part of your connectivity, rather than that ETO on board wasting half a day making numerous different telephone calls to numerous different companies that have different SLAs, and are going to get back to you at different times. So we always find that is quite a key pain point for some of the guys on board. We touched briefly on geographical and political licensing issues. Again, another challenge. Quite a changing landscape, really. But there are licensing issues with some of the technology that is used worldwide in certain areas. So something that just people need to be aware of. You need to have the expertise and the experience to know, okay, you might be traveling to that destination. Did you know that you're unable to get this certain source, certain internet source while you're there? So something to consider. And we just wanted to throw the cat among the pigeons a little bit there and mention a market monopoly. Are we heading down that route? It's a potential challenge, potential consideration. We have we're fully aware of the internet source that is out there that has changed the game. Are we getting to a point, or will we get to a point where 99% of internet traffic is going over that way? What connotations does that potentially have? Who knows? I don't want to get sued, so I won't go into it too much.
Very good.
So, future connectivity.
Yeah, so we touched on it briefly about more data, please, because everybody's consuming more data on board, more films, more content than ever before. We've seen a lot of vessels moving away from storing videos on board a vessel, where they would be streaming it directly from the internet, because the internet is so reliable, and they can get all the new fresh content straight away. Instagram, Facebook, Amazon Prime, Netflix, Hulu. I mean, so many services now that are offering IPTV, offering video content directly to users. And also the way people are consuming content. People are not really using streaming boxes or Apple TVs that much, unless it's a guest accommodation, but most people are consuming it directly from their personal devices, from their iPhones, their iPads. So content is very, very personal to every person on board. And it's almost deemed as a right when you get on board a yacht. What's the Wi-Fi password? How do I connect to the internet? We are social beings. We want to stay connected with the wider world. In fact, a lot of charters will say, what internet do I have on board? How good is the internet? So that we see as a massive, massive factor when it comes to charter guests, when it comes to online gaming, when it comes to consuming data on board. It's part of the experience of being on a boat and also relaxing as well. People want to watch a film, listen to good music. We've got new players on the forefront, which is Amazon's Kuiper. So they're going to build out to just over 3,000 satellites. They've got all their launches booked, and they're going to be much the same as Starlink, but they're coming into a field where people are going to compare them to Starlink. Starlink have set this new bar where everybody's comparing any other LEO operator to Starlink. It's cheap, it's reliable, and it's delivered on its promises. So it's built a lot of trust there with its consumers, and it's a consumer product. But it's going to be moved into it has moved into commercial as well.
And we don't really know what form that's going to take and what sort of price point they're going to be at. I mean, they'll need to be competitive with Starlink. They're coming into a market with Starlink in it, which Starlink didn't have to do. Starlink came into a market that was ripe for something like that. So, and Lightspeed as well is reasonably new kid on the block.
It's been around for a while. That's with Telesat. So that's another LEO, a constellation, along with OneWeb. So we've got quite a few players that are trying to get into that space. They will have their own USPs, their own coverage, their own equipment in some cases. So it's different. It's not putting all your eggs in one basket. You've got different operators, different players out there as well, coming to the forefront.
Yeah.
Satellite phones for everyone. That's a new a concept out there, that your phones will connect directly to a satellite. You will not be needing your phones to connect to a cell tower. So if you're out on the ocean, you're far away from land, you might not even need a satellite terminal on board the yacht. You can be out in the mountains. You can be in a remote area where there's absolutely zero cell coverage, but your mobile phone will connect to a satellite.
And they've already run some testing for that, haven't they, Jason?
Yeah, that's just as we were completely taken over by the Starlink wave coming to the industry. I think a lot of telcos and cell operators around the world are going to see, hang on a sec, this actually works. So yeah, watch this space. It's going to be completely revolutionary, where people's mobile phones will just, depending on your contract and the licensing, there's a bit more to it. But the future looks bright for connectivity. There's a lot more of it happening.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you a question. Is there a concern you guys have with Starlink? Because I kind of sense that between the lines, you're a little bit concerned, but I didn't get what is that concern.
Concerned? No, it's phenomenal. Starlink has completely changed the game. I think from a personal point of view, I'm always concerned if a customer only has Starlink.
And why is that?
Because it's not perfect. It's not perfect. It does have drops. Obviously, no system out there is absolutely perfect. But I think redundancy, diversity. The ability to be able to switch. If you were, we were reading just the other day. They're not selling any more Starlinks in London because it's completely saturated.
Yeah,
completely saturated.
You can't have it.
You can't have it in London.
Yeah, you can't buy it.
You can't buy it. You can't buy it. You try and go on the website and they say no, we've sold out. So you can't buy it in London. We've heard and we've seen real life stories of vessels, pulling up alongside a big cruise liner and they can't get anything from Starlink because the cruise liner's sucking it all in. So Starlink doesn't concern us. We embrace it and we support Starlink and it's
in fact Starlink.
You'd be crazy not to have it on your vessel, but we also think you'd be crazy just to have it. We think that a diversity, a failover, a redundancy is essential.
And Starlink fits perfectly with our ethos of having a multi-in, multi-out connection. And that's what we've always stood for. It started off on the cellular front, so people would have a VSAT connection, they would have a marina Wi-Fi connection, they would have a cellular connection. So we've just got a fourth string to the bow and a fifth one with OneWeb, where a lot of customers can plug in these other connections and have an aggregated connection. So we're providing a far more stable and seamless connection for the customer. And also comes down to cost. How much is a customer willing to spend on having a diverse connection? If they're quite happy with having one LEO connection, which works for their need and their budget, then yeah, I mean it's amazing and it's flexible as well. There are no long-term commitments. It's almost a pay as you go.
Expertise as well. We see a lot more of this, remote v onboard argument. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of connections now can be maintained from shoreside. A lot of the IT on board can be maintained and looked after we've got industry experts in this room who look after and maintain connections for yachts on board, but remotely. We see a lot more remote working, with example, crew that are shoreside, be it AVIT, be it pursers, be it some management. A lot of the roles that typically you would have a personnel on board, a cabin, a position on board, a lot of those can be now moved shoreside, primarily because of a more stable internet connection. So that would be one of the benefits of having a yacht always connected.
And did you want to touch briefly on machine learning and AI, Jay?
Yeah, so AI and machine learning is another interesting concept. Obviously, AI is here. And it can be used as well with internet connectivity. So we can go more into it with the constellations and how they're going to be doing a low-cost routing and IP to get the lowest latency. But that's essentially where AI is going to play an important factor within your connectivity, so that you're able to get the lowest latency, the fastest speed, and no drops. You'll have SD-WANs that are very powerful and very capable to monitor, to maintain, and look after all the connections on board.
Lovely. Okay, so a quick summary. So connectivity, diversity is here to stay. We suggest you embrace it. The importance of diverse connectivity is undeniable, really. You know, if you want a connection and you want a connection 24/7, which is becoming the demand, then really you need to embrace that diversity. As I said, it enhances operational capabilities, safety, keeps the boss happy, which is what most of us are here for.
Keeps the kids happy as well if they
keeps the kids happy, yeah, and entertained. An investment in the technology is investment in the future. If there's any questions, then please feel free to ask Jason. Not me.
Just a show of hands here, who has Starlink and has used Starlink on their yachts? Because we asked that question in the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any thoughts or concerns, or what is your experience? I'd be interested to hear your feedback.
There's a decent dead zone across the Pacific.
There is a dead zone. Yeah.
But you lose VSAT.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've experienced the dead zone with Starlink coming across the Atlantic?
Spun a 360, tried to get something, tried different headings.
Nothing.
The only thing that did work was a radium sat bar.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, this is where it's so important to consider where are we going, because you know if you were island hopping in the Med, wouldn't be a problem. You know, you'd be getting Starlink pretty much everywhere, unless you went somewhere that was really congested. But you know, having that diverse connectivity, if you didn't have your VSAT, you would be struggling.
One thing I would say that I'm kind of looking for is having the having the systems. That's all looking good, but I'm not a massive professional, so you kind of need that guy who call up and say, "Listen,
Sort this out."
Yeah.
You can actually explain it to someone who's not an IT.
Yeah.
In a sort of a language.
Yeah.
And is familiar with the desk.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is something.
Absolutely. But that in itself brings its own challenges, because we find with our customers, we're quite often saying to them, let us know where you're going and we can put a plan together for you so you are connected the entire way. But, you know, we all know what owners are like. You know, quite often they'll be jumping on and, they'll give you 24 hours notice. We're leaving tomorrow and we're going to XYZ. Okay, you're going to have a problem there with Starlink or whatever. Let's see what else we can do. So, you know, that
also
in a perfect world, you would know exactly where you were going all the time and you'd be able to plot that. But you're right, you know, having somebody externally potentially that you could put a phone call in and say, look, the next 3 months looks like this. Can you make sure we're covered in those areas? Yeah.
Or at least have the VSAT on a keep alive that you can turn up in the event that you need to have a stable connection or a
just explaining how carrier and network all of that.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. And then if you have a multi-connection on board, I mean, if there is a problem, then you can always get shoreside to at least get an out-of-bound connection into the vessel to see the eyes on the ground to see what's happening. To have a look. Maybe the Starlink could have been reset. There's an interesting way to reset it. You power cycle it 3 times in a row by literally switching it on, switching it off, and then you can reset it back to factory default and make sure that it's in a clear view and gets the latest firmware.
Actually, really interesting point there as well is that, you know, we've come across quite a few occasions when Starlink, it's almost there's occasions where it's almost suffered by being so user friendly, because it is plug and play, but you don't necessarily have the expertise on board to know where you're placing it once you've plugged it in. So we've come across plenty of times when that, you know, it's not in an optimal position, it's not installed properly, it's not mounted properly, and it's just not performing. Now, that reflects badly on Starlink, but having the expertise either on board or somebody that you can speak to about that and help you remotely and say, no, you don't want to be putting it there. That's going to interfere with, you know, you get radar interference or whatever it might get. So that's another point to think about, you know. It is so easy to plug and play. You know, you don't need a VSAT technician or an engineer to come and do it. But having the expertise of knowing where to place it once it's plug and play, you know, that can be a
And then having spares on board as well. You know, if there's a thermal issue where we know some terminals in the heat have had issues. I mean, Starlink are great to get them replaced, but do you keep spares on board that you can literally swap out and put a plan on at a moment's notice? So it's just planning, and this is where we say create a backup plan for your connection. Because when you're out there and you're completely disconnected, we're so used to having some form of connection to call home for help. So that's what we advocate is to have backup connections, either it's a sat phone or an Iridium or a VSAT. We've had some vessels that will even come in closer to shore and connect onto cellular so that they can get a connection if their Starlinks have dropped. So yeah, it's an interesting world we're in now. We're fully connected, more so than ever before, and all our content is consumed over the internet, which is incredible. Incredible. Whereas before, it's almost like having an iPhone now that does your video recording, your calculator, your diary, your TV. You had all these separate devices before the iPhone came along. It's the same now with internet on board. You're not using your TVRO antennas as much as they were. You're not using your VHF and UHF as much as before. You've got all your weather coming in, your navigation systems coming in over the internet, all the chart updates. So it's incredible how much reliance we are on internet, and to drum at home that actually we need to plan to have proper redundancy, have proper diversity within all our connections. And yeah, as long as we look after the customers and we give them the choice as to what diversity they want. We do see the customers are very open. Oh yes, I do need to have diversity. Like everybody knows they need internet. It's not like we're trying to sell internet to people. We're like, everyone knows I need to have internet. It's just what type of internet do you have on board? What type of a redundancy plan do you have on board, or contingency if it doesn't work? So that's where we try to add value and help.
What's like a responsible or a sensible level of a way of approaching cybersecurity from a point of view? Systems are on board, or what's a good level of security that's sensible? It's great being connected, but it has its risks. So how do you do that?
Cybersecurity, I mean, that's the new buzzword on yachts, because a lot of people are not. Well, they see that cybersecurity is very important on board a yacht, because there's a lot of people that want to gain information or get into the yacht through the internet, because it's like an open highway now, you know, and there's important information that you need to protect, you need to secure. So from a cybersecurity point of view, I would say cybersecurity isn't just IT. It's also the people on board, the devices you bring on board. It's the culture of cybersecurity. How risk adverse are the crew? You know, are they posting on social media the whereabouts of the boat and who's on board? On WhatsApp images, how are they sharing that? You know, is their WhatsApp secure? Is it auto deleting content that's after 90 days old? There's so much on cybersecurity, aside from just putting a firewall in place and blocking everything. I think that's the best firewall is a complete zero trust firewall. So you only allow stuff through that you've explicitly said, yes, this laptop goes through. iPhones now are having masked MAC addresses. So in the past, you would tie the MAC address from a crew device on the firewall and only allow that device. So do you go back to that stage where you just tie down every single device? You know your network. It's like having a fleet of vehicles. You know every single registration number and the whereabouts of where that vehicle is going. It's the same on board your network. Every single device that comes on board, do you track it? Do you block it? Do you put antivirus on board the laptops? But then you've got guests on board as well. They don't want to be bothered. They just want to get on board, scan a QR code and have open internet. They don't want to hand over their personal devices to a crew that's going to have to program it to get onto the network. So yes, cybersecurity is vitally important, but it's a big holistic view of the people, the NDAs that you have on board, the social media policy. Well, thank you everybody for coming.
Thanks very much.
Been lovely to see you, and enjoy the lovely Antiguan weather and sunshine out there. It's yeah, we had a bit of a blustery start, but it's absolutely baking out there now. So thank you very much for coming, and it's been a pleasure, and we look forward to bumping into you at the course of the show. Any questions, please come and speak to Stu and I.
Yeah.
If you'd like a brochure, a water bottle, we've got some booklets up front here if you want to take notes.
Take some freebies.
Some merch.
Some merch.
Yeah,
some merch.
Yeah. We don't want to go back to the UK with the merch, so please do come and help yourselves. And yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for...
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Well done, Stuart.
Good job. Well done.